And we are live with Samantha, the woman who brings soul into Soulpreneur. Samantha, welcome.
Thank you, Lais. That's so sweet. It's wonderful to be here.
I'm so excited. I've known you for so many years, and so I feel like this podcast is well overdue by now.
It feels very full circle in a
Yes,
lot of
it does.
ways. I'm very excited about this conversation and that you're doing this and that you're
Oh.
highlighting a few of us to do this thing.
Oh my God, so good. So just a bit of background on how we met. I was writing poetry, I'm at an embryonic state of writing poetry compared to Samantha, of course, but I was just Googling on the internet's poetry editors, and somehow your website showed up probably on page one. I just clicked on it, and there was this video that highlighted how you were doing spoken poetry. And I had goosebumps all over my body, and I just knew that's the one. It was the first website I clicked, and it just immediately was like,
Wow.
that's a full body yes for me. And so I just want the listeners to know we will dive into poetry later on, but has been my poetry coach, and she's amazing as a poet as well. So Samantha has so many talents. It would take many podcasts to go through all of them, but today we will surely, yeah. We will try and shine a light on those talents and gifts you have and that you bring into this world. And I hope I can do you justice, because each of one of these talents would fit into one podcast episode, just the poetry alone. And just so the listeners know, you've been teaching poetry at the Juilliard School for actors.
Yes.
But also you are an author of a zillion children's books by now that I also want you to speak more about. Yeah, she's internationally traveled. People invite her to come. Like South Africa was one of the things I observed on social media. You were doing a poetry over there. In fact, she will read one of the poems today, which I asked her to do for us, which is really an honor that you're doing this, Samantha. But the most important thing we will shine a light on today is your journaling business and the whole journal you created for different age groups. Please share yourself a bit more about this project.
That would be the Black Unicorn Journal of Passion.
Oh my God. So for those of you on YouTube, you can get a glimpse of what it looks like. The Black Unicorn Journal of Passions.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Lais. It is this conversation. I'd love it to be a synthesis of the many things that I do. We did meet as poets, and I have evolved and in some ways devolved by creating this journaling notebook, because I basically am going back to my foundation as a writer. I am known as a poet and as a children's writer, but I originally started with journaling. I loved using guided journals growing up. I loved journaling in a blank notebook. And this is a project that I think can be in service of both, where you have something beautiful to write in, and you also have something that can prompt you to write in your own book. But I decided to make some beautiful prompts that I use in my creative writing practitionership, as well as prompts that I've used in my intuitive work when having consultations with clients that feel disconnected from themselves. That's essentially what it is. It's feeling disconnected from self, feeling like an internal agitation with the ways in which you are conducting your life, and feeling like a change needs to happen and that you have to be the one to create it. But what is it and how? And having a sort of struggle with identity. Who am I really? And this sort of never ending struggle between role and soul. And so I wanted to create something that helps us to kind of clear away some of the debris of just being human and socialized to be human on this planet, and get to the soul. I classify soul, without getting too heavy, I see soul as that sort of that matrix of essences that make you. Like that makes you an individual drop of the one, that makes you unique and unreplicable, right? Like that is soul. And then there's the role that the soul plays on the earth, and like the many roles that this one soul makes. And through this ego, which is the human personality, and the ego is like the vehicle through which we drive through life, and the soul has to be kind of help drive this thing that kind of has a personality, that has its own, like, the ego has its own thing going on sometimes. But I
Yeah.
believe that when we're in better touch with our souls, and our soul could get more in the driver's seat of the ego, and we can drive our lives better through this knowledge of self. And that's like all this is about, is like self-definition, being able to say who you are and what your role is.
I feel we can already wrap up. There was already so much wisdom in the first 5 minutes. I don't need any more.
Well, you know what's so amazing is that my son has been doing this book with me. I actually have a children's version to this. And so we do the book together. And the other day he did 2 pages. And let's just be very real. He is 8. He's a boy. Writing is not his favorite thing to do, even though he is really good at it. So he grumbles all the way to the page. Let's just be very clear. But I make him do it, as we make our kids do things. And after he finished, after all the grumbling and the curmudgeon-y vibrations that he was giving me, after he finished, he was in a much better mood. And I said, "So how do you feel, son?" He says, "I feel smarter because I know more about myself."
Oh my God. Can I also just dive right into your son? Because I just want the listeners to know that Samantha has 2 mini-me's who are, even those mini-me's who are like 8 and the other one is what, 5?
4.
They are more poetic than I am, or, probably most of us. They already like at such a high level. Like he had a dream. It actually was a nightmare. And he was just sharing with me what that nightmare was about in such a poetic way. I almost fell off my chair because it was so beautifully expressed. And I can't retain exactly the words he said. Maybe you have 1 sentence or 2.
Yes, my son had a dream about me dying. And he said that there were 3 holes in my chest in a triangular fashion. And he said that I was bleeding out of the holes, and that when I died, I became dust and I disappeared into the wind, and that I approached him again in the form of a puddle. And he saw me through the puddle, and I waved at him. And then I disappeared through the top. It was like I disappeared from the puzzle, and the sun became brighter.
Yeah.
And it was so moving.
I know. I was so moved to be in his presence and to witness this poetic expression of his and reiterating his dreams.
I truly felt that day that was like God talking to me through my son's dream, because I believe that what he's witnessing as my son is my own transformation.
I'm sure.
My own personal transformation. And that's what that dream is about. And so comforting him and telling him, no, I'm not going to die anytime soon. I'm not planning on that happening. And this dream isn't literally about that. But look at the many ways in which I morphed and changed form in this dream energetically. So I feel like that's what he's seeing. And so that it is very poetic.
It is. I wanted to dive into a bit of your upbringing, like what's your background? Where did you grow up? How did Samantha become the woman she is today? Share
my God.
whatever you're comfortable with sharing with the listeners about how you grew up and how did you become the woman you are, the amazing goddess you are today.
Wow, thank you for that majestic question. But I was born on the Twin Island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. So I am Trinidadian born. And my grandparents were school teachers, actually. I ended up, before I left Trinidad, I was going to my grandparents' school. It was a primary school that they established. And I went with all of my cousins. And so a lot of my most prolific memories growing up were of my grandparents in this position, my grandmother at the chalkboard, leading classrooms, and, being in charge. I think that my identity is really kind of rooted in that ancestry of just teachers. Like I come from teachers. I have aunts and uncles that have become teachers and preachers. And so when I moved to the United States, I feel like there's this self that goes through a very life-changing decision. And I feel like there's always like a part of you that also lives that other life. There's this part of me that probably never left Trinidad, and I wonder who she would be. But the part of me that did leave Trinidad became a writer and a teacher in my own right. My grandmother was an English teacher, both of them, my grandmother and my grandfather. And I came up to teach creative writing. I fell in love with poetry at a pretty young age, around age 14. I had a teacher that asked us to write a poem for a Christmas. It was like a Christmas assignment, very simple, but it changed my life because it introduced me to creative writing and the endeavor to look at a piece of paper and to fill it with something, your imagination with a memory. It's an invitation that continuously changes my life, but definitely rocked my world at age 11. And so when I started writing that, I wrote the Christmas poem, I made it rhyme. You know, I had already started reading some Shel Silverstein, who was an early poetic influence of mine, those rhyming, fun poems. And I just know that I really enjoyed writing about a Trinidadian Christmas in the United States. I was missing home sorely. I did not want to, let me just be very clear that I did not want to leave Trinidad. I was
How old were you when you left?
I was 7. I had absolutely no control over the situation,
Oh my
but
God.
I was so like happy at home with my cousins and going to my grandparents' school. I mean, we were fully installed, but due to my dad's business, we left the country and we moved to Venezuela for about 6 months, and then we moved to the United States when I turned 8.
What an experience.
I know. So,
Wow.
so like this sort of like longing for home has been like a major theme in my writing since the very beginning, because I wrote this poem about Christmas, and a Trinidadian Christmas is a very sweet affair. Like the foods that we eat, the drinks that we drink, it's a very special time of year for the islands because there's special foods and drink that we only eat and drink at that time. So I felt like the poem was almost like a time machine. Like it took me back to what a Trinidadian Christmas reminds me of, and it gave me some solace. And I said, hey, I like this poetry thing. And that poetry and I have been like, I shouldn't say like this ever since, because I really actually can go long periods without writing a single poem. But every time someone has a conversation with me, they feel the poetry in the way I express things. So I am poetry. I don't feel like it's like basically the air that I breathe. So I do miss writing it when I go through long spells without writing it. But the beautiful thing about being able to publish poetry and have it out in the world is that it's perpetually a living, it becomes its own organism.
Wow. Yeah, I also just want to reiterate that you are a traditionally published poet. And as I said, you were traveling international. People are booking you to come and read your poems. Your latest book is called The Animated Universe. So I got a copy, but it's in storage in Germany because I'm a traveling nomad. I always have to only keep little things with me. But I have read the book, and the first page, the first poem, I read it and I had goosebumps, as I always have when I read your poems. And I just had tears flowing, you know. It was just so amazing that I asked you today if you could read that first poem from your book, The Animated
Oh my
Universe.
gosh. Well, I can't promise that all of your listeners will have the same response that you did.
Well, let's see.
But thank you so much for receiving my work so fully and so heartfully, Lais. It means a lot to me. Yes, this poem, I'll just preface it a little. It is the title poem for the book, The Animated Universe. And I've been working on this book of poetry for 20 years. And this is a pretty new poem to the collection. And I wrote it for some 8th graders that I was teaching at City School of the Arts. I was a writer in residence at this charter school for the arts. And I taught creative writing for a full school year. And so I really got to bond with my students. And for one of our writing exercises, I gave them the writing prompt to start a piece of writing with what if. And I tend to write the prompts with my students while they're writing. I am also writing. So I wrote this in community with my students. And so it really means a lot to actually open my collection with this poem that came from such a beautiful exchange. the animated universe for 8th graders at City School of the Arts. What if I were to tell you that I am you, that your face is my mirror? What if we're all infinite expressions of one beloved? That we, my friends, are multidimensional masterpieces. What if I were you, with your ancestors ghosting through my veins, housing your past life pains instead of mine? If I had the sweet and sour privilege of ambling in your dress rehearsals of skins across the cosmos, if I were the only you in all the animated universe, would I arrive at your exact missteps? What if my failure to understand you is my folly? What if it is possible to be broken and still whole, brilliant fissures of light leaking up and through? What if vulnerability is our best armor, our iron? What if pristine planets with pure beings do exist, but we chose this evolutionary planet of hard rocks? What if the assignment is to forget ourselves into remembrance, is to love unconditionally in the muck, to spiral up from our primordial depths? What if we chose all of this anyhow? Our wonderfully shitty parents, hurdles, backhands, and crash landings. What if the Most High indwells in the lowly and far flung, and from the reaches of hell, we can still be each other's angels? Friends, friends, if I were to tell you all of this, would you believe me, or would you nod? Would you nod and say, I know? Poem.
Again, tears running. It's just incredible. Like hearing you speaking it, such a gift.
Thank you for reminding me of this
Oh.
poem. I do have some readings scheduled in New York City next week, and this is a city that I'm returning to. This was my home for 10 years, and
Yes.
I left right before the pandemic, and I haven't been back since. So this is a really momentous journey, and I was not even thinking about reading that poem because I sort of bury poems. Like when I first came out with the book in 2020, I felt like I read that poem quite a bit, and so I tend to put poems to bed, and I forget that I wrote them. Like I kind of forget about them, and I put other poems in my repertoire. But you asking me to read that poem just really just reinvigorated my love for it and my desire to say it more often. Thank you for asking me to read it and for receiving it so fully, wholly, and solely.
Yes, my goodness. So as I said before, we worked together. You were my poetry coach, and I just want any listener who is interested in improving their poetry, even if you're a beginner like me, to really contact Samantha. She's an amazing editor, coach, writing coach, whatever it is you need.
Yes, that is a side of my work that I really enjoy. I love working with poets that are aspiring poets, even, people that like, I don't know what I am yet, but I want to write something. Very tender stage of the writing process. And those that kind of know that they're writing poems and would like to improve them. I'm here for all of those stages of the process. People that are ready for publication, they want the manuscript looked at. So I kind of come into different people's literary lives. I feel like it's just the right time for them.
Yeah, definitely.
It just kind of happens that way.
Yeah, it just happens. So speaking of poetry, you're also a writer and author of so many children's books.
I think I'm close to a dozen. I would say that's started. And I was staying at the house of Marilyn Nelson. Marilyn Nelson is a poet who was also the poet laureate of Connecticut at the time. And she had a writer's retreat that she started out of her home called Soul Mountain. And Marilyn at that point was writing. She's a very prolific children's author as well, because her poems get published as children's books about different historic figures such as George Washington Carver and an enslaved African named Fortune. So she writes poems that are marketed as young adults. So I was inspired by that. And I started writing children's books from that experience of being in Soul Mountain and being in community with Marilyn. And so while my root and my passion and my reason for writing rests in poetry, there's a beautiful way that poetry translates into children's work, even if it's not a poetry book. I have written chapter books, I've written early reader books where being a poet was very much in service of writing these books with very small word counts because we're writing for the little ones, right? So I can't sprawl the way I would. So I have these, 24 words per page. So how do I make that as concise and as impactful as possible? So in many ways, I felt like I've been writing poetry all of this time, but I have written a range of things. I've written picture books, I've written chapter books, I've written tween novels. It's been a beautiful career to read books that that the next generations are going to be digesting. So I feel like a heavy responsibility to stir in some nutrition.
Beautiful.
in my books. Yeah.
And I know I'm not big on this because I'm not American, but you have this character, Charlie Brown, and you were involved in this project somehow?
Yeah, so there is a new Apple TV series that's sort of like resurrecting the Peanuts shows, Charlie Brown and Friends and Snoopy. And so you'll see that on Apple TV that there are a few newer episodes. And I feel like they're doing some reconsidering of some of the characters, and they've decided to give Franklin more shine. And Franklin is the once upon a time controversial, and for a very long time, the only Black character on Peanuts. And there was a time where he was not on Peanuts at all. So he was indicative of a time called integration in the United States when, Blacks and whites were able to mingle in social settings. Right. So the inclusion of Franklin's character is American history. And so he's finally, I think, through this TV series and through the book that I was able to adapt from the TV series, like Franklin's like getting a voice, like a real voice. We learned more about his history, his family, where he's from, what his story is. He's not just the Black kid who sits by himself on this side of the Thanksgiving table in the Thanksgiving episode, that he has a history, that he comes from a people that are history. And so it's beautiful I was able to write 1,000-word picture book about Franklin that I adapted from the TV series.
That is such
coming out about him.
meaningful work too.
It is. It's like I stumble into these opportunities and I sort of don't realize how much of an impact I'm making until it's more and I still kind of keep it moving, So it's great. It's great to shine in unseen places.
Actually, I wanted to talk to you because as a writer, I did go through a phase where on Twitter, a lot of light was shown on the publishing industry that wasn't representing Black authors very well, or any other authors other than white authors, to be honest.
I want to thank you for your allyship and for making your stance clear about the publishing industry. I share your sentiments. I think that there are so many melanated stories of all kinds, that are sitting just beneath the skin of many people who, if they only knew that their works are wanted and that there's an industry that recognizes this need for melanated experiences of all types, and not just the few types that grab people's attention, but all sorts of family stories and ancestral ones, and everything in between, love stories and non-binary love, and all of it. It's just so all of it, like under the umbrella of Black literature, Black poetry. It's the African American literary tradition that, when I was in high school, I was introduced to this tradition through English teachers who read Toni Morrison and read Zora Neale Hurston and read James Baldwin. And these are authors Gwendolyn Brooks, that changed my life and changed my landscape as a writer. So to be a part of this tradition and to also mentor younger writers who are also a part of this tradition, and to teach and, to be a sort of steward of this tradition by leading people to literature that, this is what preserves our humanity. So this is
Yes.
like part of this project, the Black Unicorn Journal of Passions, is like bringing people back to the page and to the archives. This is a piece that, imagine if you fill this out in this year of our Lord, 2024,
I love it.
and put it away somewhere and you put it in your archives and your grandchildren find it. Oh my gosh. Like, that's the way I look at it, because my grandparents, who I told you were school teachers in Trinidad,
Right.
like they left this planet Earth, and I don't have anything that they wrote, or I don't know who they were really. I remember them from my childhood, but I don't really. I would love to get like something that told me something about them. And so imagine getting something like this from an ancestor that they,
Oh, I would love that. Can I ask you, what's the inspiration behind the name, the Black Unicorn?
I'm so glad that you asked. Speaking of ancestors, there is a poet by the name of Audre Lorde that wrote a poetry collection and a poem called The Black Unicorn.
Oh, I did not know that. Oh, I have to go look it up now.
So this book, this Black Unicorn, is a collision of two things happening. One, it's like it's kind of a contemplation of Black sheep having like the Black sheep status.
Oh, right.
Yes, like a lot of my clients, and I am my own best and first client, have like feel like the Black sheep of your family.
Oh,
you know, you feel like you're just very different from the people that you came from, and that it's a painful difference. It's not one that's neutral. It hurts. It's been hurtful, and I thought about it. I'm like, but what if we're not sheep, and what if it's a different creation? And then I thought of, somehow this is where Audre Lorde's The Black Unicorn just has that animal in my consciousness. And I went back to her work, and so I got the book The Black Unicorn, which I suggest for everyone, along with my poetry book, The Animated Universe. But yes, The Black Unicorn, Audre Lorde has a poem called The Black Unicorn, and the first line of the poem is, "The Black unicorn is greedy."
I love it.
And you're like,
so
what?
Unexpected.
I know. If you look it up, you'll find it. But it's "The Black unicorn is greedy." And the last line of the Black Unicorn poem, if you'd like to hear it, is,
of course,
"The Black unicorn is not free."
Oh, wow.
So I felt very like contemplative around the Black unicorn's freedom, and why isn't the Black unicorn free, and what can help the Black unicorn get free, and thinking about the ways in which I am the Black unicorn, and how many other Black unicorns are just waiting to meet in some woods somewhere and just be our full Black unicorn selves, not a shadow, not a silhouette, not a mistaken thing, but something that is fully seen. And so I thought to create that clearing in the self with this book of prompts. And I'm creating an online community called Black Unicorn Therapy. And this is where we go into a Zoom and we do the work we do this together. Like, we have a time to write in our pages, and then we share, if we'd like, our writings, and the writing itself becomes a therapy. It's not a therapy session. Like, I'm not a therapist, but I will have therapists present at times, because I have
you are a healer, just being in your presence and sharing this journey with you. I'm sure anybody else who will join this group will feel this way. So just so the listeners know, I'm going to hyperlink everything in the show notes, including this group that is starting, or is already running, but you're starting a new one, right?
Yes, I have started it, and I'm going to expand the circle, because it's something I've been incubating, because there's a method that I've been using. Very simple, actually. It's nothing, no bells and whistles, but just like a great way to hold space around the questions and the prompts in this workbook, and infusing it with some intuitive exercises like breathing, maybe a little oracle card here and there.
Oh my God.
All the things that we love.
Totally. Can you share, do you have like an ideal person who joins this group? Is it women only? Is it open for men as well?
Thank you so much for asking that. Of course, we want to say it's open to everybody, but so far, really, I would like to have a men's group, but I am finding a men's facilitator for the men. Personally, I want it to be for different groups, but I would say the group the groups that I am feeling very close to are writers,
Mm-hmm.
mothers,
Mm-hmm.
especially single
Oh
mothers,
my God. Yes.
and trauma survivors.
Oh, so important.
Hmm. And sometimes they're all three. But any sort of triangulation of
Mm.
those populations, of those groups, that's like my total sweetheart. It's like my total sweetheart
Oh.
client.
I
Yeah.
just also want to say, I mean, I see you rocking it online because you keep traveling and you do all these things, like 1 million things at once, like publishing books, writing this journal and publishing this journal, which we will speak about also more about the publishing process. Knowing that you have two small kids and you are a single mom, like how on earth do you do all of that?
Oh, well, uh, it is not easy, but thankfully, I was able to go away this weekend
Mm-hmm.
to a writer's retreat, and I had my family's support, and
Nice.
I had the support of my friend. So, there are people behind the scenes that are making the journey easier for me.
Mm.
There are times when I haven't had that. I'm glad to say that, I have a brother who that is close by who can,
Mm.
help out with the kids and stuff like
Uh,
that. So I feel very grateful for that. But it is not easy. I would say in my head, I have a lot going on in terms of I have a business within a business. We have the
yeah.
workbooks. I have my poetry and my writing career. So I have books that I'm writing, and then I have clients that I'm coaching, and I
Mm.
also have a movement that I'm building underneath all of this. And I have
Yes.
projects that are still waiting for me to write them. So it just feels like it's never done. And so that all of this is like going through my head with I'm a kind of like it's like a non-diagnosed neurodivergent situation going on with me. So I'm still
Yeah.
learning how to harness all of the tentacles in my mind into the remembrance that it's from one organism and it's not like, oh, I'm everywhere. And
Love
then
that.
also just being a present parent, and yes, it's not easy, and it's my life, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, because I'm so happy to be in this position to, you know, to take this helm and to steer the
Mm.
ship with these two young boys into uncharted seas all of the time. My life is very uncertain, and a
Mm.
lot of unexpected things happen. So I have to be in a perpetual state of surrender, quite honestly,
Wow.
because I'm not under any illusion that I'm in control of any of it. So
I wanted
absolutely.
to talk more about the journal and the process and how it got published. So anybody who
Mm.
feels inspired to, oh my God, I would love to publish a book myself, to know that they are capable of doing that because it's possible. Anybody can self-publish. I self-published my poetry book. And so can you take us, you already described inspiration, why you did the journal and the name.
Yes, I talked about, being inspired by my own life and by my
Exactly.
clients to create the journal. And then I am a traditionally published author, as I mentioned,
Mhm.
and I talked to my agent about publishing a workbook, and she said, I don't think that I can sell it because workbooks are a lot of people are making workbooks.
Mhm.
So that's they call it at the market being glutted
Mhm.
with these workbooks, and they also can be expensive to make. So a lot of
Mhm.
publishers, so she felt that I would have to do it on my own if I wanted
Mhm.
to do it. And this was going to be my first self-published project. And you have to
Mhm.
feel really strongly about something to self-publish. I will say you have to believe that you are providing something that there is a market for it. So a glutted market means that a lot of people want journals. Like
Mhm.
that's the good part.
True.
And that you are also bringing something to the market that's unique, and that is your singular offering. And so once you feel like you know what those things are, then I would suggest self-publishing and doing the damn thing.
Yeah, I love it. Do the damn
Yeah, like
thing.
do the damn thing. If I have something, I'm bringing it to a market that wants it. People are going to use it, find it useful, and it's going to solve some problem. and this is what there's a need, and this is what my problem is, what my project is filling. So once you can answer those questions and put a beautiful name on it, and I would definitely say self-publish. I am publishing this in 2 different ways. So I went through big old bad Amazon. I went through a company that really ushers you through the process. They help you like design a cover, and they format it for you. And so that's Amazon Publishing Central. So I went very mainstream with this book. And I also have a children's version of the same journal, of a similar journal, one for teens and one for younger kids, like my son's age. My son is 8 and he's been using his. And I went through a publisher, like a printing house in Germany. So I'm also published, and I'm selling those in bulk to different institutions and doctors' offices and such. So I'm publishing those on my own with that printing press, and I've gone more mainstream for the adult version. So that's the route I decided to go. I'm still learning. It's my first time self-publishing, as I mentioned. So I'm still wending my way through the process.
So you had help with designing the cover. What about the layout inside the book and all the images you have in there?
The layout and all the imagery, I did that. So I made the book on Canva. So I became a Canva ninja, and I designed every page of the book, and the only thing that they designed is the cover, and they set the book. But yes, I did all of the pages.
Amazing.
They kind of came to me. Sometimes I just knew when a page just needed to be free. Yes. And other times I was like, we're going to go for bubbles. We're going to go for boxes. We're going to go for... So the pages, you'll see for some of them, it's like bullet points.
Yes, I see. Beautiful.
Because sometimes a little brainstorm, a little pre-writing will help. So yeah,
all right. So people can go onto Canva, and there's a free version. I use the paid version, but I think even with the free version, you get a lot of design options, right?
Yes, absolutely. And looking at the different pages gives you inspiration for your own pages. So yeah.
Oh, wow. So you designed the whole thing yourself, and apart from the cover that Amazon did, and what they helped you with it?
Yes, they helped me with the cover.
Wow, what a project. Yes. So I want anybody who feels inspired to publish a journal or even any book you can self-publish you can do that. And I had my poetry cover, a friend of mine who is a painter or an artist. He did the drawing, and then I gave it to somebody who had design experience, and they created the cover. And I also went through Amazon, and of course I invested in you as my editor, which I think is important to have a book edited.
Yes, absolutely. I am a big advocate of editing before you publish anything.
Exactly, because I think the self-publishing industry got a bit of a bad reputation because of that, you can self-publish without anybody looking over anything, and so the quality might not be as good sometimes.
That's right.
But yeah, so that's something I would never want to save money on. It's a good editor on any book. Yeah, so, and then I can only share also for myself, going through the Amazon self-publishing process, it was fairly straightforward. You just fill in all the details, you decide on the price, and they will calculate how much the pages cost. If you use color, it's like incredibly expensive. If you don't use color, it's much cheaper. Of course, for a journal like you, it just makes sense to have lots of color in it and to inspire people. Because, it's so beautiful.
I love the color. I was willing to pay for it.
Exactly. So, and you can also decide on the quality of the paper, like what kind of paper do you want? So that,
standard or premium.
Yeah.
I tried the standard and I changed it to premium. The premium is very smooth. The standard's more grainy. And so this is the premium that I got, and I'm much more pleased with it, with the paper being premium. It's exciting to watch your own book come to life, and it is. I think it's just important to remember it is a collaborative process.
So for you who already published so many books traditionally beforehand, did it feel very different to have your own project that you conceived and then you implemented it all by yourself, and then you birthed it by yourself? Like, was that a very different experience?
Yes, it definitely hits different. I'll definitely say that. Like, even though it's not the project that I expected to make, because it's a workbook, and I was not aspiring towards making workbooks. And I say workbooks because this is the beginning of a series of such workbooks. This one is about passions, but the next one
Mhm.
is about origins, which is like
Oh,
ancestors.
oh
Yeah.
my God, I will be all
Yeah,
over that one for sure.
origins, yes. And
So
you
good.
contributed to that one, and you have an ode to one of your great ancestors. And I have
Oh,
that poem still that I would love to
no.
include. And I have a book of shadows, and I also have a book of intentions. So this is a series of workbooks. And I, like I said, it was not an aspiration of mine to make workbooks. So I was kind of like, what is this thing that wants to come out of me? So I was a little making this, I was sort of a little surprised, quite honestly, as a creator. Like, wow, this is not what I expected to be making. I thought I was going to be writing my next bestseller.
Mhm.
And it was this. And to like bring it into the world in the active way of being a self-published author, I was, like I said, it hits different, and I feel
Mhm.
more ownership over it. I feel
Mhm.
like this is my baby. I feel like I've marketed this book more than anything I've marketed. I've come out with a lot of books, and I just like might mention it once or twice. I do not post a lot about my project. So I've posted about this more than any other project. I'm more invested in it doing well. It's been amazing. It's
Oh
been a
my
great
God.
engine for sure.
So just to
Something to
circle,
rally around.
yeah,
Yeah.
just to circle back to the group support you offer there. Is there a date already that you have in mind, or is it open until people sign up and then you decide?
It's open on a rolling basis, but we are going to start in March. I'm going to have like a trial week, the last
Mm-hmm.
week in February.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the week of the 26th of, I'll have an informational meeting,
Mm.
and then we'll have like a week, or this is what it looks like. And then
Wow.
we're going to start officially in March. What I've noticed is that a lot of people are really suffering in isolation,
Mm.
and they need community. And it's basically like when I come and say, hey, I'm starting these journaling cohorts, I'm basically putting something that they desire right in their lap. So,
True.
and and these are people that live all over the country and world. So I would like to, Zoom is a great meeting place.
Yeah.
So yes, until we start doing it in person at the retreats that I'm going to be forming in the not so
Mm.
distant future all over the world, we're going to start on Zoom.
Mm. Oh my God, such a vision. I love it.
Yes, let's bring it
Oh,
back to the basics.
wow.
Journaling, again, I started journaling at age 11,
Yes.
and it's just such a beautiful way of expressing yourself, and so authentic. And
Yes.
I believe that without the pressure of it having to be a poem or a story, I think there's just, the pressure is really off, and anyone can journal.
It's the only ritual I keep up in my life is journaling. Like everything else comes into my life, goes out of my life. Journaling is the one
Oh,
thing that is really belongs to me, you know?
oh, I love knowing that. It's great to
Yeah.
hear that, and for that to be reinforced.
No, it's
Yes, it
beautiful.
is the only thing. Yes,
Because
only
yeah, we can
constant.
be so true with ourselves when we journal, and it's so therapeutic.
It is so therapeutic.
Hmm.
And I love the idea of normalizing doing it in community,
Hmm.
because it is so private. And I think a lot of us are conditioned, some people have been conditioned to stop journaling, or because they don't want to get caught. So there's this interesting taboo around
True.
having a journal or journaling. So I was like, what is it to
Yeah.
actually go into a space where you journal and then share?
I love journaling, but I also love reading other people's journals, like Anais Nin. I went through all of her journals, like all of them until she died. I just
What a
love it.
gift.
Yes.
Yes, I've been keeping a journal since age 11, and I will
Yes.
write it in my will, who will get it, who I
Hmm.
think will have the most respect for it. And have at it, descendants.
Oh, so
A
good.
lot of
Yeah.
juicy, lots of juicy nuggets in there.
Oh, it should almost be compulsory, for parents to write diaries so the children get something meaningful once they're gone, so they can read through it and understand who their parents were.
Yes. And what's been beautiful about doing this workbook with my son is
Hmm.
that he's creating his own archive at a very
Mm.
young age. So he can look back on
Mm.
himself and say, wow, so he's giving himself
Ah,
a gift too.
oh my God. I mean, if he's poetic already now by age 8, imagine when he's grown up, he's like,
I know, right? He
I
already
have
has
a Pulitzer
bards.
Prize, and I don't know.
Anything that this young man, that is my son, decides to put his focus on, watch out, world.
I know. I wanted also to briefly speak about your agency called the Aspirant Agency of Intuitive Talents, which I know is like one of your other gifts of having created this agency and running this agency. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Oh my gosh, my baby.
Yes.
So I started the Aspirant agency in 2020 when my ex-partner and I started, I would say, doing intuitive readings. I would say that we didn't know what we were an agency then,
Mm.
but I've been reading oracle cards for myself for the past few years, and my partner kind of gave me I guess I would say permission, because sometimes people introduce a concept to you and you just didn't think about it. I didn't think about doing readings for other people at all.
Mm.
And I discovered my aptitude for it, to give readings for people online and from a distance. So we started to give readings together because he was a dream medium. So he was able to read dreams, and we would combine our gifts into these beautiful dream and oracle readings. And through that process, we kind of organically started to meet other practitioners that were adept in different things. And so I have a friend named Mona Webb. Mona is a longtime friend of mine, and we met as poets, baby poets on the Poetry Slam team like 20 years ago. But Mona is also a very powerful ancestral medium and medical intuitive and medical medium. And so Mona basically told me around the time that I was giving all these readings, she's like, I have about 8 people waiting to read with me, but she's not very adept at like money, talking about money and like time and time zones. And she's kind of, Mona's also neurodivergent and a badass and doesn't have time for it. And so I told her, oh my gosh, you have all these people lining up to get readings with you, and what's stopping them is just you not being able to handle it. I'll help you. And Mona said, okay, and I'll give you 20%. And I was like, do we have a deal?
Wow.
That's what started the Aspirant agency, was truly like a desire to help a friend, not even thinking that it was a viable business. And then her making me see that this is a viable business, is platforming her, and just basically allowing a space where she can show up to a new client and everything is taken care of.
My
And that was
God.
my job. I would interface with the client. I would get a sense of what they're struggling with. And so that's how the agency formed. They call me the Oracle of Oracles. And what I do is, people come to the Aspirant agency when there's an aspiration and there's a blockage, right? There's something that I want, or I want to get better at, or something I want to learn, or something and there's something coming between me and this thing. And so that is like the crux of an intuitive consultation, is like, what is your aspiration? And like, what do you think is hindering, like what brings you, what brings you by? Because you need help with something you feel is hindering you, or there's something you need to overcome. And for some people, they might need to tap in with their ancestors and have an ancestor mediumship. That when you have a good medium, those sessions go very deep, like very profound, when you get to commune with an ancestor several generations back and get a sense of a family cycle that's been playing out in your life. And just getting that sort of medicine, I think, can be life-changing, as well as medical intuition, which is sort of understanding that all of our bodies' physical ailments, most of them have a spiritual root. And sometimes it might be something that we're doing emotionally that is causing constriction on an organ. Like, we just never know. But sometimes with just the right information and troubleshooting, like a very big problem can go away. And you realize, oh, it's not a problem, it was a puzzle. And here's a missing piece. And so I feel like sometimes having like really adept and truthful spiritual practitioners in your life can be like life's best secret weapon. And not to mention fun, to learn things that I'm kind of, you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to know this, but obviously you are, because you're getting the information. You met the right person who can deliver this medicine to you. But it's just like, it's like a peek behind the curtain, of existence for your benefit. And I think it's been a wonderful side of my life to meet different practitioners and shamanic healers that have such an amazing listening and spiritual teams with them that are here to help humanity. And it's really like the X-Men. It's just
Wow.
that's what it all falls down to. The mutants are here, the X-Men is
Ex-woman.
real, and I'm X-woman, and I'm Professor
Yeah.
X-woman who finds them all and creates a wonderful
Ah,
place of learning and exploration of what it is when we come together as healers, as healing practitioners, with our overlapping abilities. That's what excites me, is when we have collaborative sessions within the Aspirant agency. We also have we have a trauma therapist on our team. We have a spiritual coach. We're pretty holistic in what
wow.
we provide. And then for people that need something else, we're connected to a lot of people. We have a lot of resources and affiliates also.
That's a
So
beautiful project that you brought to
it
life,
moves me.
that you birthed.
It
You birthed
moves
so
me.
many amazing things.
It's an amazing ride. I just find that when I sit with someone and they are willing to tell me their most tender stories, I feel extremely privileged to
Yes.
be in a position to witness what people are truly struggling with. And when they ask for help and they open themselves up to my support and my team, it's like a real privilege to be in this position. And yes, to be able to birth all of these like wonderful books and projects and
Mm.
initiatives.
I think it's a privilege to be in your energy. So I want the listeners to find a way to work with you, be it through the journaling, the cohort, be it through the agency,
Somehow
be it
come through somehow.
whatever it is,
I
I
know,
can
right?
I can only recommend Samantha in all of the things that she does. So please check out the podcast show notes. You can see how to get in touch with her on her social media, on her website, and drop her a line on her social media. If you're on social media, say hi to her.
Absolutely. Love
Samantha,
that.
it's been such an honor to have you on and to chat to you and to have you share all this wisdom right from the first minute that we started today. It's like, wow, the channel opened and you're already channeling amazing wisdom. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your
My
presence.
absolute pleasure to talk with you and to get to, share with your guests. And thank you for having me. I look forward to our next conversation always.
Absolutely. So goodbye to everyone. See